All right, so it's the Triton Method fails. Today, we got years of experience now using this, and there's been some fails along the way. We've made some mistakes, and we learned from them. And you can hear them from us, so you don't have to make them yourself. All right, so starting with number one, what makes this any different than standard 2 to 4 part?
Yeah, and that's the mistake, is not understanding what does make it different, and it's really simple. If you have a refugium or you don't want to do unnecessary water changes, this is for you.
Yeah, that's the two things right there. So if you have a refugium, it's designed to replenish elements automatically for what the chaetomorpha and similar algae's uptake, as well as trying to eliminate some of the unnecessary water changes. Let's maintain the chemistry correctly to begin with, so chemistry isn't the reason that we're doing water changes at all. So number two, commonly confused all the time, there's the Core7, and then there's the other methods.
Yeah, so don't make the mistake of not understanding which one is which and when you should use one or the other, and it's really simple, refugium or no refugium.
Yeah, so if you have a refugium, it's called Core7, and it's going to have elements in there to replace the elements that are uptaked by all of the algae growing in your refugium. You do want to replace those because there's algae that lives within your corals called zooxanthellae that rely on those very same things. So if you've stripped them all out of the water, bad news for your corals. So it is an intelligent way to replenish those things. However, if you don't use a refugium, you don't need to replenish those things, and so other methods is the right thing. So if you're doing any other method and you just want a solid 4 part that is designed to help keep chemistry in line so you don't have to do as many water changes, other methods is it, tied specifically to no refugium. So number 3, this is also kind of tied to ICP testing, but how often?
Yeah, the mistake is thinking that or assuming that you do have to do the ICP test as part of the method. We found out a different way because we realized how effective water changes were at balancing chemistry, and we just didn't send in as many ICP tests.
Yeah, so there's two methods here. I can rely on the ICP test to tell me, you know, hey, the chemistry is off, you should go correct it. Yeah. But always like a couple of things are off, and so like I'm looking for trends. I end up you know, sending all kinds of tests in. There's another solution, which is just do the water changes anyway, and then sometimes come back here and do an ICP test just to make sure everything isn't totally out of whack. So you're going to have to figure out which one is easier for you. Is it sending in an ICP test and then correcting with different solutions? Sometimes it's going to tell you to do the water change anyway. Or just do the water changes as part of good practice and know you're using a high quality 2 part that is designed specific for your refugium and reducing the reliance on water changes but not necessarily eliminating them. So there's a theme here if you're watching all of these, as I keep stealing the thunder again. So here it is.
The mistake here is assuming that the no water change portion of this is the solution or the end all be all, because you can actually do water changes regularly but use this for the benefits that come with a complete 4 part method.
So I think that early on that was like the big thing, right? What, I can get rid of water changes, like, so my nitrate and phosphate are super low, I've done the test kit, all the chemistry is in line, like, well, why would I do a water change if the chemistry is right and it's not polluted? Yeah. Well, I think that's accurate if you're sending in all the test kits and you're going through all of the rigmarole. But one of the things here is I don't think it's accurate to say it was designed to eliminate all water changes, and that's kind of what came out of it. What it really is just designed to reduce them. So what if I could use this method and cut out half of my water changes? Wouldn't that be a win? Oh yeah. Right, so really it's just designed to reduce them so you're not doing unnecessary ones. Get the chemistry right and only do them when you need to. All right, so number 5, when I originally encountered the Triton method, it actually said you needed a pretty giant refugium to do this.
Yeah, so the mistake is, you know, not recognizing the difference between a giant refugium or lighting in a refugium effectively or more effectively. I think, you know, same thing. When the original Triton method came out, they were using T5s or banks of T5s to grow chaeto, and now we have, after we've tested, and now there's more horticulture specific type lights available for refugiums that are far more effective at growing chaeto or growing those macroalgae. You can probably reduce that size of that refugium.
That's certainly what we have seen over the years, is it's not as much about the size of your refugium, it's about its effectiveness. Yeah. And so if I screw in a little compact bulb over a giant 40-gallon refugium, it's really not going to do a whole lot. However, I could scale that thing down to 1/4 the size and then put the proper light and energy above it, increase the rate of photosynthesis by more than 4 times, and get the equal result. So it's just as much about the efficiency and design of the Refugium as it is about the actual size. So we're seeing a lot of people successful with the Triton method using a much smaller Refugium than originally listed, as long as you're lighting it properly. Number 6, if this is in your DNA, hold it back.
Yeah, the mistake is playing mad scientist. And if you're one of the ones that are sending in the test constantly, making the changes, getting the whole line of elements and whatnot, it can get really easy to get caught up in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, send in a test, do it again. It's just confusing and probably a lot more headache than it has to be.
So for that purpose, if you feel that in your DNA, send in the test list frequently so that you're not trying to there's a tendency in here. It's like I send in a test, it tells me boron is depleted, and then so I put some boron in, it tells me the amount I need to do to fix it, but I really want to know, did it work?
Yeah, exactly.
So I send in another test, and then it says lithium's a little off. You should do some water changes or whatever. So just note that when you're doing this, don't chase the chemistry tail and become a mad scientist. This is designed to give you pulses, the closest look into water chemistry that we've ever had. Just use it responsibly. So send it in quarterly, or don't try to chase your tail. We're not looking for perfection here. We're just looking for doing it better than we've done it before. Number 7 is this one's I've been asked a lot of times. We finally got some definitive answers out of them.
And the mistake is not considering an algae scrubber or an algae reactor to be just as effective in some cases as a Refugium.
Yeah, so we're just using plant life to uptake the nitrogen and phosphorus out of the tank. And so, yeah, why not? Use an algae scrubber or use an algae reactor. Algae reactor is the same thing as a Refugium, it just comes in a tube. Now they sell those tubes in high power versions, with the Pax Bellum. So there's a high power version in there that actually has the right size in it as well. So there's no reason you can't use that. The only thing that I've heard about the algae scrubbers, and I gotta tell you, I haven't used a lot of them, so go research this for yourself, is that a Refugium, as submerged in the water, tends to take a lot of CO2 out of the water and increase the pH, which is very beneficial to the tank. There's a whole series of information. It's probably more beneficial than you ever thought about, really. But, however, with the algae scrubber, because your algae scrubber, you're dribbling water over that algae film. The algae, I think, is actually taking a lot of atmospheric CO2 out of the air rather than the tank. It's probably a combination of both, but there are some benefits to using a Refugium and a reactor that the scrubber might not do as well, but the scrubber comes in a much smaller form factor, so it's just about the right tool for the right job. For you, all 3 will work. All right, number 8. There's 2 alkalinities?
Yeah, the mistake is thinking that you need 4 dosing heads or 4 dosing containers, when actually you can mix 3A and 3B together because it's the same thing, and you'll be just fine.
So we haven't heard 100%, but I've been kind of nudged to believe this, is there's actually the same thing in both of these.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, most likely, is because this allows us to keep the system really simple. The calcium can actually be much more concentrated than the alkalinity. So what it allows us to do is if we're dosing both 100 milliliters of this one and 100 milliliter of the other alkalinity, 100 milliliters of calcium, I have doubled the concentration of the calcium, I'm double dosing this, now it's balanced. However, that's the way that a lot of retail products work. They just want to make it simple, so the same amount of each one every day. However, if you're a little bit more advanced than that, what you can actually do is just mix these together into one solution. It will be double the amount of water that's in there, but you can dose twice as much. So you could just, if this was 100 in the calcium, you could just dose 200 milliliters of the combined solution here. So do what you want. You can do it 1-1-1-1, or you can mix these together into one vessel and dose twice as much. Number 9, it isn't the law.
No, it isn't. So the mistake is considering or thinking that ICP is the law and thinking it's, you know, lab grade type of results when it's better than what we've had before in a variety of different elements. So don't get caught in thinking that ICP is the law and start going down that rabbit hole of arguing about it with other reefers and what have you. And definitely don't get caught in over testing.
Yeah, so one of the things that you see like in the discussion within the community is it does it or it doesn't do it. And there's no room for in the middle, right? And so here's the nature of it. It's for what it is, a relatively affordable option for getting the closest window we've had into the chemistry. It is not perfect. The other portion of it is actually, well, I get a piece of paper, and the piece of paper has a number on it, almost like that digital readout on your HANA checker, right? Just makes it definitive. It must be right, right? So the reality is it isn't. And so it's just a close window into this thing. So specifically with some of the higher range elements, it may be off by as much as 5 or 10%. That might not sound like a lot, but if your calcium was off by 10%, it could just as easily be 380 as 420 or 420 as like 460. And those things actually would matter to you. But because there is a number on it, and also, it was that when you sent this in. So I don't actually use these for things like calcium and magnesium because I actually have a test kit at my home I can find out right now. And the piece of paper actually I don't trust more than my test kit. I think they're probably in a very similar accuracy range. But I can't test for molybdenum and I can't test for zinc or any of those other things at home. And so that's what this value is. And many of those things are testing now into the parts per billion. And you should know that even if I went to have analytical testing done and I spent a fortune on it, the depth that they give me is generally down to the parts per million. When you get down to that parts per billion range, a lot of times you're using kind of an algorithm to get close and make a guess. They're actually perfected those guesses over many, many years now, so they're pretty close. But it isn't designed to, for you to go chasing your tail, trying to figure out, well, it said 7 parts per billion and I need to dose 1 more. I mean, you're probably close enough as it is. So use the tool for what it is. Don't argue about whether or not it's perfect or it's total garbage. It's actually in the middle. It's the best window into these things that we've ever had before. Number 10, if you're gonna get into this, unless you have a really small tank, I think one of the mistakes is this.
Yeah, the mistake is getting these smaller jugs, these 1 liter types. They have a 4 liter box too, but then they have the the big giant like 5 to 10 liter jugs. And if you're going to use it and you're going to be tied to it for any significant amount of time, why not just buy in bulk?
Yeah, I mean, you are definitely going to use it, and it doesn't go bad. So save yourself some money and get the larger sizes. It's just going to be a lot easier. All right, so if there's only one thing you heard today, let it be this.
Yeah, for me, it's getting caught in that I can't use the Triton method with an algae scrubber, algae reactor. It's not the same as a Refugium. All 3 are just as good, and do what works best for you.
And for me, this actually ended up being less with the Triton method about trying to get rid of all water changes from my life and more about using the right chemistry solution for if you have a Refugium on your tank. And so there aren't very many. In fact, I think there's only 1 2-part, this one, that's actually designed around specifically being used on a Refugium. So that's the one thing that I would take away. All right, so if you want to learn more about the Triton method over on the BRS website, it's right here.